Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 17th of October of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, we have a lot of changes on the ground. Basically today on the 17th of October the Russians managed to break through the most important strongholds since the beginning of the special military operation, and we will discuss this just in a minute. But today, this video, I would like to start with Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, who today visited the Brussels and who was talking with NATO authorities and with the European Union authorities. And as a result of meeting, Zelensky gave interview. He was asked lots of questions, and the most important things, let's discuss. Zelensky today told us that in the conversation with Trump that took place in late September, during his visit in New York, Zelensky said that either Ukraine will have nuclear weapons or we will be with NATO. That was stated by Zelensky just less than a month ago. And also he added that now Ukraine choose NATO. So it's like he's doing a favor to Russia that now he's choosing NATO, and he always has option to choose nuclear weapons. And later we got additional statement, but this time we got the statement from the German Bild, and German Bild claims that Ukrainian leadership is considering the possibility of creating nuclear weapons in the event of a new attempt by the Russian armed forces to attack Kiev. The publication cites an unnamed official who allegedly stated that Ukraine has the necessary knowledge and materials to create the first atomic bomb within a few weeks. Of course, it's very difficult to understand whether the Zelensky himself and Ukrainian authorities are bluffing or they're telling the truth. And to receive answer to this very important question, whether it's just a regular bluff or the Ukrainians are really planning to create nuclear bomb and then to blackmail Russia with this, let's discuss another post, another interesting publication that was made today from Kiev. And we're talking about this one. And for example, today, and not just today, but for the previous probably 2 or 3 weeks, we received a significant number of updates, both from Zelensky, from different Ukrainian authorities, and of course from the foreign ministry, that the Russian army is preparing to strike nuclear power facilities. This was stated by the head of Ukrainian foreign ministry Sybiga at a joint briefing with the foreign ministers of the Nordic Baltic 8 countries in Odessa. Russia has complete air superiority. We know that they are preparing strikes on our nuclear power facilities. This is very important, and the statements of Zelensky about the nuclear weapons and this statement of the foreign minister about Russian preparation to begin attacks on Ukrainian nuclear facilities are connected. The thing is that, as we understand, the NATO countries, Western countries, are not going to accept Ukraine in NATO, both in NATO and European Union, until the end of the special military operation. And Zelensky realized that the only option when he can force the Western countries to get deeper into this conflict is the nuclear catastrophe. So this is the reason 3 or 4 weeks ago, the Ukrainian authorities began talking and began spreading the information that the Russians are about to begin attacking Ukrainian nuclear facilities right before winter comes, just to defeat the Ukrainians completely and to make a blackout all over the entire territory of Ukraine. And the Ukrainians began talking about this probably a month or 2 ago. But during the previous few months, we haven't seen even a single attempt from the Russian side to attack nuclear facilities, and we understand that everything goes not according to Zelensky plan. So that's why he start using plan B. He start talking about the things that he has nuclear weapon. We need to understand one important thing. If Ukraine has a nuclear weapon, there is just one place, one way, and one place where the Ukrainians can store this nuclear weapon, and of course we are talking about Ukrainian nuclear power plants. These are the only places where the Ukrainians can hide or where the Ukrainians can keep their nuclear weapon. For example, this is Yuzhno-Ukrainska nuclear power plant, and this is the only territory, if Ukrainians have nuclear weapon or materials for nuclear weapon, this is the only place where Ukrainians can keep this. So by talking about nuclear weapon, first of all, Zelensky was trying to force Russia to go according to his plan. So Russia would begin attacking, must must attack Ukrainian energy facilities before winter period of time, and Zelensky is doing everything he can to force the Russians to do this, because if the Russians don't attack nuclear facilities, then Ukrainian plans would be completely collapsed and Ukrainians will be completely black out all over the entire Ukraine, and even without Russian strikes on the nuclear facilities. So I see the situation this way. Now let's move to the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about the Kurakhove direction, because during the previous 24 hours we got the significant number of updates from this territory. At the previous video we have already discussed the situation in the area, and we have already discussed the different posts and different updates that were published by pro-Ukrainian sources, and the Ukrainians are saying that the armed force of Russian Federation is currently carrying out a rather large regrouping in the Kurakhove direction. The deadline is the beginning of the 20th of October. The same processes in the Kursk direction are almost completed. So that was stated this morning, and we already discussed this in the previous video. But later during the date we got the significant number of updates from the village of Maksymilianivka, and as you can see, based on the updates we've received, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. This is the map on the 16th of October, and this is the map on the 17th of October. We made adjustments on map. First of all, based on the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation report, the Russians are saying that as a result of active operation, units of the Yug Group of Forces South managed to establish complete control over the village by the name of Maksymilianivka. So this territory was completely captured by the Russians. And later we got two more videos from the same direction. For example, this video was published by the forces of 46th Air Mobile Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, and in this video we can see another FPV drone attack on a lonely Russian soldier that was moving in the central part of the settlement. So this is the first video, and later we got another video from the Russian sources, and in this video we can see how the Russians were trying to attack the building, and they dropped grenade inside of the building, and then they were trying to run. Then there was a very big explosion and the building was reduced to ruins. Based on these three icons we have adjusted the map. First of all, the Ministry of Defense report and 3 geolocations from the central part. Anyway, the village of Maksymilianivka has fallen, and currently there are no more settlements, villages, towns or cities between the village town of Kurakhove and the edge Russian positions in the village of Maksymilianivka. If the Russians are able to enter the first buildings further in the western direction, obviously these are going to be the first buildings and the first streets and constructions of the town of Kurakhove, which is very important because the town of Kurakhove is the heart of the South Donbas offensive operation. As for the original South Donbas offensive operation, we have changes and updates from the village of Katerinovka. According to pro-Ukrainian sources, the Russians managed to take under control the southeastern part. Also, the sources reported that the significant number of Ukrainians surrendered on the territory of the settlement. As for the village of Bogayavlenka, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to destroy the significant number of Ukrainian positions, warehouses, ammo depots. The village was under very heavy fire, and we can see this on the map. If we summarize everything since the beginning of week, we see that this territory is under very, very heavy fire. While the Russians were regrouping, the Russian aerospace forces were reducing everything to ruins, and the Russians are about to begin another full-scale offensive with the purpose to defeat the Ukrainians completely in this direction. Now let's move further and let's talk about the city of Selydove, the biggest city ever in this direction. According to information we have, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly in the southwestern direction. We have geolocation, we have video. Let's take a look at this video, and in this video we can see how the Russian tanks and armored vehicles and personal carriers with a significant number of infantry were attacking, storming Ukraine positions. We can, of course, the video doesn't have very good quality, but even from this angle, from this perspective, we can recognize the shapes of tanks, vehicles and infantry that landed in this direction and began clearing the Ukrainian positions. Based on this video, most of the mappers have adjusted their maps in Russian favor. We can compare the map for the 16th and the 17th of October. This is the situation yesterday. As we can see, the Russians just began their offensive operation, and first mappers have already updated these territories in Russian favor. We're talking about pro-Ukrainian sources. And as for the 17th of October, we got the video that confirms that the Russians began full-scale offensive in the direction of this dense network of the fortifications. I calculated, and there are around 9 strongholds that the Russians are planning to capture, and most likely the Russians are not going to have any problems, because as you can see, most of these trenches are watching and are looking in the southern direction, and as you can see, the Russians are attacking from the east. Now let's move to the southwestern part of Selydove. This morning we got report from the neutral mappers that the Russians managed to improve their positions a little bit along the railways. So this is the situation on the ground yesterday on the 16th of October. This is on the 17th of October. But this report about Russian additional progress we got in the morning of the 17th of October of Ukrainian time. And right before we start making the video, we got another post from neutral mappers, and according to the latest, the freshest update from this direction, the Russians managed to cut the road to Selydove-Kurakhove physically. We didn't have enough of time to adjust the map. We will adjust the map before the next updates, and tomorrow in the morning of Ukrainian time we will see the current situation on the ground. So according to neutral mappers, the Russians cut the road physically, and the distance between possible Russian edge positions in the southwestern part of Selydove and the village of Vishnyovo is less than 1.5 kilometers, which is already almost complete encirclement of the city of Selydove, with the creation of another cauldron, the biggest cauldron ever since the beginning of the special military operation. We're not talking about Mariupol, of course, and Selydove is the biggest town that was encircled that is about to be encircled by the Russians. Now let's move further. Also, we have additional changes and additional progress on the ground in the northern part of Selydove, but as for this direction, the situation is much more complicated. The Russians are moving through the fields under the open air. It's very difficult to attack under very heavy fire from Ukrainian drones, so the Russians are being seen, are visible from every single direction. So that's why the Russians are moving much slower in the comparison with the southwestern direction. But the most important is not whether the Russians are moving fast or slow. The most important is that the Russians are moving despite the fact that they're moving slowly. They're moving, and they're about to begin the battle for the most northern part of the city of Selydove. Now let's talk about the Lisovka. Today we got geolocation. As you can see, we have adjusted the map. Today the forces of the 68th Jaeger Brigade of the Armored Forces of Ukraine published the video of how they were fighting with the Russians on the territory of Lisovka. They discovered the movements of the Russian personnel carrier that entered the village, and they began attacking them. So this event took place exactly in this area, and based on this video we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. This is the situation on the ground on the 17th of October, and this is the situation on the 16th. As you can see, this territory was already colored by different mappers. Today we just received geolocations that confirmed additional progress of the Russian forces. Now let's move to the Toretsk agglomeration. During the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything special. There are very heavy clashes. The Russians counted today that they managed to take under control up to 15 strongholds or something like this, but without any locations to confirm this. Anyway, the battle for Toretsk is about to be finished, and not just because the Russians have almost reached the outskirts of the settlement. The reason why the Ukrainians are going to retreat from the city of Toretsk is not about the battle of Toretsk, and it's not that the Russians managed to create complete ground superiority. The reason why the Ukrainians are going to fall back, probably even by Monday, by the next Monday, is that the Russians managed to break through the Ukrainian defense belt in the southern part of the city of Chasiv Yar. If you remember, for the previous few weeks, we've been talking a lot about the situation in the southern part of the city, and we were talking that most likely the Russians are going to attack the city of Chasiv Yar from the southern direction, from the recently gained positions on the Ukrainian side of the Seversk Donetsk-Donbass canal. So we were talking about most likely these attacks from the Russian side, and we made our conclusions based on the significant number of videos from the Russian side of how the Russians were bombing and attacking exactly this part with the tall flamethrower systems and with aviational bombs FAB 250, 500, 1500. A lot of attacks, a lot of strikes. The Russians basically for the previous few weeks have been reducing reducing this territory to ruins, and when the Russians got the results, they began full-scale offensive. And today we got geolocations that confirm the progress and the results of Russian full-scale offensive in the southern part of Chasiv Yar. Let's take a look at this video. In this video we can see the Russian soldier, he's the commander in this direction, and he reported that as a result of clashes the Russians managed to raise the flag exactly in this building. We can recognize this building. It's you can take a look at the shapes of this building. You can take a look at the same building on map. You see that the geolocation was added accurately, and the flag, Russian flag, was established exactly in this point. And based on this video, most of the mappers have adjusted their maps in Russian favor. Let's compare the changes on the ground for the 16th and the 17th of October. So this is the situation on the ground yesterday, and this is the situation today on the 17th of October. Significant progress, and most likely due to the fact that the Russians were raising the flag in this part without any risk, without feeling any risk from the Ukrainian side, we can make a conclusion that most likely the Russians have already established complete control over this part of the city of Chasiv Yar. We just haven't received any updates regarding this, but something like this most likely is already happening in this direction. So this is the situation, and as you can see, the situation is very difficult for the armed forces of Ukraine. Now let's move to the Seversk direction. As you can see, we have the significant number of geolocations, since the most important are coming from the highest positions from the Bila Gora. This is the Bila Gora, and some sources are saying that this is elevation, and the elevation, the highest point in the Seversk direction, the biggest, the most powerful stronghold, was captured by the Russians, and this was confirmed by the Ukrainian sources. In this video we can see how the forces of 58th motorized brigade were trying to repel Russian full-scale offensive with a significant number of armored vehicles and infantry that were attacking in this direction. A lot of episodes, a lot of moments, very interesting video. Based on the video, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. This is the situation on the ground on the 16th of October, and this is the situation on the ground on the 17th. Furthermore, as you can see, we have the significant number of geolocations of how the Russians were bombing the Ukraine positions in the southern and the southeastern direction from the city of Seversk, which confirms that the Russians have already begun or about to begin the full-scale offensive operation in the direction of the Seversk. Let's move further and let's talk about the southern Kupiansk direction. According to pro-Russian sources, the Russians managed to cut the southern Kupiansk direction also into. The Russians reached the river of Zheribets between the village of Zaryan and Tarskoye. So according to some pro-Russian reliable sources, this territory was captured by the Russians during the previous 24 hours. And the situation for the Ukrainians on the line between Novosadovo, Terny, Yampolovka became critical. Now they need either to fall back from this territory completely, or they will stay there forever. Now let's move further and let's talk about the northern Kupiansk direction. As for this territory, since the beginning of the Russian full-scale offensive operation in the direction of the river of Oskol, we haven't received anything that can confirm additional Russian progress on the ground. Just reports from different sources about a significant number of buildings that were captured, but nothing to confirm this. Now let's move further, and we are coming most likely to the most important updates. We're going to talk about complete disaster that we currently can see in the Kursk direction. Yes, we have adjusted the map in some points in Ukrainian favor, at least along the villages between Nikolaeva, Daryevka and Darina. In this video that was published by the Russian sources, we can see how the Russian airspace forces were bombing the Ukrainian edge positions in the village of Darina, and obviously this video confirms Ukrainian presence and strong control over the settlement. So we have adjusted the map. This territory considered as the area in the gray zone yesterday, and today we have geolocations that confirm Ukrainian control. But the most important updates are coming from the cauldron between the east of the village of Lyubimovka. If you remember, during previous few days we've been talking a lot about the significant number of Ukrainians that were encircled in this area. We were talking that up to 1 battalion was encircled tackled by the Russians. They created a cauldron for them, and most likely today on the 17th of October, the situation for this battalion become critical, become vital, and it was decisive, not even day, it was decisive minutes for the Ukrainians that managed to survive in this cauldron during the previous few days. And today the Ukrainians for some reason decided to begin breakthrough from the Ukrainian encirclement in the direction of the village by the name of Sverdlikova. First, and let's take a look at this video, we got 3 geolocations from these fields, and this is the first video. And in this video we can see the significant number of the Ukrainians almost without arms, without weapon, without vehicles, without anything, because they were completely empty. They lost everything during the battle with the Russians for the previous few days. The Ukrainian forces haven't managed to break through the defense, the encirclement, and to bring additional reinforcements and weapon. So that's why the Ukrainians were retreating, were running completely empty. If we start counting the number of soldiers, obviously we will count a few tens, few dozens of soldiers, maybe 50 soldiers, maybe 60 soldiers that were running away from their positions in the direction of this, in the safe direction. But of course the video, as you can see, was made by the Russians. The Russians were waiting for them, were expecting them, and when the Russians discovered the Ukrainians that began running from their positions during the daylight, the Russians sent the drones. In this video we can see the same group of Ukrainian forces that continue moving through the fields. The nearest buildings are very far from them. It's just the fields. The exhausted and tired Ukrainians are getting deeper and deeper inside of the fields, and when the Ukrainians were in the central part of the fields, the Russian drones came for them, and we understand what was next. And obviously this is the results, and this is the end of Ukrainian Sudzha offensive operation. Of course, there are still a lot of territories that are under complete Ukrainian control, like the city of Sudzha itself, but most likely we're gonna see a lot of episodes of the same type that we see just now, of the significant number of Ukrainians, tens and hundreds of Ukrainians that would run away from the Sudzha direction due to very poor conditions and very difficult situation with the supply and support of the Western weapon. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.